back, everyone. This is Fieldr Academy, and this is your host, Connor Firmender, CEO and co-founder of Fieldr. We really appreciate you joining us again on this fine morning, afternoon, or evening. Whenever you happen to be listening to us, we just appreciate you being here. We're coming at you with episode 12, coming together as a community with a very, very special guest on today's episode. But before we get into that, it's no secret our country is facing a significant change. Much of it can definitely be considered needed change. But where does that movement really take effect? At what level should our communities be pressing for the change we seek? Short answer, it begins at the local level, at the city and county level. We're taking this episode to focus on coming together as a community to initiate and mobilize the movement our country seeks with practical and leader-like action steps. And that just doesn't go for our Southwest Florida community. That goes for our entire state of Florida and for our whole country. We have an exceptional guest on today's episode, Sarah Owen, President and CEO of the Southwest Florida Community Foundation. Sarah leads a passionate and diverse team dedicated to driving change for the common good. The foundation is committed to engaging the community in conversations and action that creates a sustainable, positive change and provides the funding to make those changes a reality. Her journey into the nonprofit sector followed a career in investor relations, public relations, and corporate communications. She worked for publicly traded companies on the New York Stock Exchange, as well as private companies throughout the southeastern United States. Sarah brings a focus on innovation to her work at the Southwest Florida Community Foundation. Under Sarah's leadership, the foundation has become laser focused on regional issues affecting the quality of life in Southwest Florida, gathered hundreds of community leaders and stakeholders around these issues, and has grown the foundation's assets to become one of the largest funding organizations in the entire region. She serves as immediate past chair of the Community Foundations of Florida, Florida delegate for the National Vision 2020 initiative, and serves on the Healthy Lease Steering Committee. The News Press named Sarah their 2016 Person of the Year, and I certainly think that was well-deserved after all that. Sarah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today's episode.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be with you today.
Everyone, again, that in the very beginning of this, I kind of mentioned, we're in some heavy change right now, right? It's happening everywhere here in Southwest Florida, all over Florida, South Florida. We've seen a lot of movement going on over in Miami and a lot of the major cities. And so again, we wanted to take this episode to acknowledge that, to really dig into that, just acknowledge it and let the movement know, Fieldr stands by it and we're here. But before we really get into the details of that, Sarah, I just want to kind of dig into more of the foundation, maybe inform more of our listeners on that. So from what I know, and I did do some research into this, and I might be wrong, but the foundation is it's only a few years old, or it's really because then when you came on a few years ago is really where it took to the next level. And that's probably where it really started getting known, because I only moved here 6 years ago, but I want to say it was a few years ago when I was really being made aware of it. So I would just love to learn more of the history, and our listeners would love to learn more of the history of it.
So I love this question, and I love the fact that you think it's a few years old.
Oh my gosh.
No, I really love it, because that's what I want it to feel like. So it's been in existence for 44 years, right? And community foundations across the nation are over 100 years old. I think the oldest one is 105 years old in Cleveland, Ohio. Community foundations were really established by people who wanted to hold the community trust, right? It was not established for high wealth individuals that were looking for tax shelters. It was really about how do we take community resources and change the community. I have a saying and a theory that every night we go to sleep, we put our heads down on the pillow, and when we wake up in the morning, the community will have changed, because everything and everyone is always in transition. So the fact that you think it's a few years old is really telling, because it signals that you became aware of it when you were working on something you cared about in the community. And that's what we want it to feel like. We want it to feel like your foundation, not a 50-year-old organization, but we want the wisdom, experience, endowment of 50 years to help power the right now thinking. So oftentimes when I go to give speeches or just have conversations, one of the first questions I'll say is, how many of you have ever heard of the Southwest Florida Community Foundation? And, hands will go up. More hands go up now than when I first started 8 years ago. But then I'll say, with everybody's hands kind of sheepishly up because they're afraid I'm going to call on them, right? I'll say, okay, how many of you know what we do? And then kind of suddenly the hands kind of start to go down. I think the creation of Collaboratory, which will be 2 years for the physical space in October, really changed the dynamic of people understanding what our work was about. You know, you just hear the word foundation and a certain image comes to your mind. It can seem unattainable and big brotherish and financial-ish. When I watch PBS shows, right at the end of every show, they have somebody in a really snooty voice, you know, saying that this show was brought to you by some blah, blah, blah foundation.
Right.
So I like the idea that our space and place Collaboratory has created a new energy. And now more people know about Collaboratory than they do the Southwest Florida Community Foundation. And that's was our intent. Collaboratory, by definition, it's not a new word. Collaboratories have been around for decades. First one at University of Michigan, Steve Jobs was involved in it. It really was spun up through the sciences and academia, right? That's the main two places you would see Collaboratory emerge. And the definition of Collaboratory is a laboratory without walls. So even though we have a physical space, which is on Martin Luther King Boulevard in Midtown Fort Myers, it's a renovated 1920s train depot with some added space. The idea is not that it's only a physical place. It's a space that you can connect to virtually. There's pop-up events out in different parts of the region. There never was an intention that Collaboratory would only be represented by a physical place. Now, the impact of COVID and the pandemic has really escalated and elevated this virtual reach out to the community. So going back to what I was describing as a community foundation, you know, we are trying to connect people, resources, and innovation. So a lot of times in the early days, before Collaboratory even opened and we were, you know, renovating and building, I would say a lot what it isn't. Right? It has a shared workspace element, but it's not a shared workspace. It has an incubator element. It's not an incubator. It has a lot of components of things we can identify with, but the idea behind it is a space and a place where people come together to grapple with challenges, innovate, think together, bring resources together. We need more of that. And it was important for the foundation to create this physical hub, plus the idea of a space. There are so many people we haven't engaged with yet. Civic engagement's so important. So anything we can do, whether it's a nonprofit coming in to host a gala or a meeting for no charge, or young entrepreneurs, experienced entrepreneurs coming in to do pieces of their work, whatever that is, we're not focused on those individual elements. We're focused on what happens when those elements collide intentionally and organically over a beer or a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, or a real intentional meeting that's being created in the space.
That's exactly what I see in it. And not to literally use the word foundation, given, you know, the title of the organization, but it sounds as though the Collaboratory also in itself has become a foundation for anything that is, you know, that is community. It can act as an accelerator / incubator. It can act as that gala for that nonprofit. It can, right, it can be treated as whatever it be needed for that community to bring value to one another. So yeah, I love it. I love it.
A lot of people call it a clubhouse.
A club.
They're like, this is like the clubhouse we've been looking for, where people who are wanting to talk about these things, like-minded, you know, and like-minded means different things. There's all kinds of like-mindedness, not just not one group of like-minded, but people that are really dedicated to change in any form or capacity, feel like they have a place to hang out now. And the best part is our offices are in here, so I get to hang out with them. So I run into people, I meet new people. It's like a clubhouse for me, for sure. Getting up to come to work pre-COVID and coming into this space was every day was a new adventure, because you never knew who was going to walk through those doors.
That's awesome. You know, I always say, and I always love to preach it, do what you love and you'll absolutely love what you do. And it certainly sounds like you do. Absolutely. So you just brought up COVID, and we're not going to take this episode into that direction, but I'm just super curious. Let's tie in the Southwest Florida Emergency Relief Fund. Our listeners might be somewhat aware of it for a few different reasons. One, just from any promotion, any reposting we've done from it. I myself, I was very, very grateful and blessed to have worked with you and Carolyn and your team to raise about $1,000 for the Emergency Relief Fund. So I would just, love any insight, how it's effectively, how I'm sure very much positively impacted our community to help us, get us on our feet, and would just love any insight into it.
It was created exactly for what you just said. And you raised $1,000 in an unselfish act of directing birthday celebratory gifts to helping other people. I think in a time of emergency or disaster. Now, look, pandemic is something we've never contended with, but look, this area has contended with hurricanes, red tides, flooding, a lot of different things. But our instinct when something happens to our fellow man or our physical community, we want to do something. And in times of hurricanes or red tide, one of the options is getting out there, rolling up your sleeves, and being close to people. We're used to helping by gathering. So this is a new experience. We have to find ways to help without gathering. There's not physical connection that can happen to actuate that help. So the Emergency Relief Fund was created to give people an opportunity to do something. They can make a donation of any size and know that that's going to directly go, due to our strong partnership with the United Way, into the hands of nonprofits that are addressing real needs, grassroots boots on the ground. I often say you can't be there now because of social distancing, but this activates your money to get it where you're wanting it to go, to food relief, to rent assistance, to PPE equipment, whatever it might be, whatever might be needed. It gives people the chance to do something. And I think we seek that. We want, what can I do? How many times when something terrible happens, personally or to your community, you say, I see you, what can I do?
I want to tie a couple points in now here together. Given just the context of Fieldr, and to, just very quickly bring you up to speed, Sarah, and all of our listeners. We've been working with Lee County for quite a while now, starting to develop their portal that's going to allow all of their high school students here in Lee County to find different work-based, project-based internships, all those various experiential learning opportunities. Would love your expert input on where you see the job market here in Southwest Florida and kind of navigating where it's kind of sitting now, and what do you maybe project the rest of 2020 to look like if you're able to kind of put a finger on that.
Yeah, and so I want to be real clear for your listeners. When I talk about business, and I'm very intentional about this, I incorporate nonprofit and for-profit businesses together. I think we have right?
Absolutely. Please do. Yeah.
We nonprofit is one silo and for-profit as another silo. And really it's just a tax designation. Right. Nonprofit need revenue models. They operate as businesses.
Yep.
And there's a myth out there that somehow the nonprofits are dependent on the for-profits. I've had a lot of conversations during this COVID period where folks have said, well, we've really got to stand up the for-profit businesses because then they'll support the nonprofit businesses. And that's not the trickle-down economy model that you want. Right. We're counting on these nonprofit businesses to take care of things that government and the private sector can't. We can partner with them, but we have to actualize some action. So what I'm seeing all businesses doing is pivoting now. So in the very early days, it was survival. There's a lot of eye on cash flow. Cash is king at this moment. Mm-hmm. And so redeploying the resources from government entities and the private philanthropy sector has been critical, whether it's been PPP loans, in Lee County specifically, the Lee Cares program, where they can get access to capital right now to bolster their workforce, because workforce is the heart and soul of our economy. So we have to find ways to support companies as they pivot. They've had to reimagine. So you see bubbles where things are going really well. It kind of depends on what that workforce sector is or what that small business makeup. So in an area like a Bonita Springs, I just recently heard the Bonita Chamber leader talk so optimistically because things are really turning around there due to the sectors of businesses they have, wealth advisors, accountants, that kind of thing. In underserved communities that were vulnerable to begin with, and in the nonprofit sector, nonprofits who didn't have reserves are vulnerable. So it's kind of shining a light on vulnerability. So you're seeing certain sectors hiring and certain sectors not. And so I think as those businesses begin to pivot and we get a clearer picture of where the new opportunities are emerging, it's what makes your platform so fantastic, because I think it'll really point and make those matches to the emergent work opportunities and connect that up and coming workforce to what is coming out of the ashes, so to speak. And I am seeing in the last 2 weeks more innovation than ever in businesses of thinking of new ways. But we can't forget those that were underserved in diminished communities with high rates of poverty have been harder hit, because COVID just shines the light on what was already so vulnerable. So we've got to keep our eye on those communities and understand that just because it's good in one bubble doesn't mean it's good in all the bubbles.
Right. No, a lot of great points there. And to kind of build on this is how kind of our team over at Fieldr, how we view our platform really being able to be valued and really being able to serve those connections is, as to your point, as businesses do start, further navigating and repivoting themselves to, in essence, be able to find that sustainable position to, continue to ride through the storm. As positions do become available, knowing we're working with high school students here, right? We're talking with high school students. We anticipate on seeing a lot more of low cost to no cost, or low pay to no pay help needed, the project-based, the work-based, and let's bring in the nonprofits. I am absolutely in full agreement with you when you say, they do need to be in the same style, right? They're in the same ballpark, same playing field. A lot of people don't know nonprofits still do need to drive profitable, sufficient numbers to sustain. It's a company at the end of the day. You're absolutely right, and you do a phenomenal job of always expressing that and getting that, making it more known. But I think we're going to see a lot of that, a lot of that volunteer service learning, different, the no pay to low pay help needed. And that's okay, because who's on the other side of that? High school students who just need those experiential positions. They need the experience. They need, and a lot of it's tied right into their curriculum. They take a lot of those, OTJ, on the job training, OTJ classes, internship classes, a lot of just, let's call it career exploration classes, all now require some form of that engagement. And so that's where I feel like a lot of just mutual need is going to come together is experience and a lot of that just additional help. Yeah.
We're seeing that at the foundation and Collaboratory this summer. A lot of college age, and this is more college age students, high school, but college age students who had secured internships at Google and really high flying companies, the internships were wiped out. We have a group of 10 students from the University of Michigan School of Information, who many of them were going to be in non-domestic internships in South Africa. All those internships got canceled, right? So the moment was, what does this look like for those students who are, many of them master's and graduate level, that were in the midst of research projects and that kind of thing, that they're directing now these efforts. We have several interns working on our sustainable program, our sustainability programs, our work with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. They were all planning to go somewhere else. They're local students, some of them, some are from University of Michigan, going to universities all over the country, that are now directing their expertise here this summer because they're here staying with family, or they're working with us virtually, whatever it takes, so that they can continue their work. And I think you're going to see more of that, like you're describing, with these high school students being able to be connected to opportunity that will influence them and redirect our workforce in the future.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I thoroughly agree with all of that. So you know what, I want to take a kind of a shift here. Now we're going to kind of take a shift here. I want to bring up a bit of another topic that we did, introduce in the beginning of this episode, and that's the current civil rights movement that's going on right now. I believe I did see, Fieldr Academy, we participated in what is now becoming hashtag Blackout Tuesday. It was about a week or so ago. It looked like, I think on Instagram Foundation participated in that. I'm curious, from your perspective, in what ways have you seen communities in the community, companies in the community react to the current civil rights movement? And with that said, though, how do you think businesses can take necessary steps, action steps, to participate in needed change?
So I think you saw at the beginning, right after George Floyd was murdered, and the light and the wound was pulled open again, as it should have been. I think Will Smith said, racism hasn't gotten worse, just now we get to film it, right? So
Right.
it was right in front of all of our faces. And so our first reaction, going back to what I said about the emergency fund, what do I do? How can I help?
Exactly.
And we saw a lot of gestures. So as you mentioned, the foundation honored Blackout Tuesday, but we were very cautious to make sure that we weren't living in a gesture only environment at the foundation. We used that day, we came out the next day with our words. I don't even want to call it a statement, because it was just our words to the community. We started it with, to everyone in this community who we love so well. We really wanted to reach out and say, because there's healing that needs to be done right now, listening, and gestures matter, protests matter, all of those gestures really count. But the very next question out of everybody's mouth is, and so what are you going to do about it? So for the foundation's perspective is the mayor's going in, making sure that we administer scholarships to students. We're doing grant making into the community. We have a large board. We have a team. What are we doing to activate anti-racism in all of our actions? Somebody told me yesterday that it's going to take great courage for a company not to just silo out something right around equity and racism, like here's our fund or here's our program. It's more about everything you do as a company. Are you using an anti-racist equity lens in everything you do? I saw a post that said, I read your statement, now show me a picture of your board of directors.
Right.
Meaning,
good point.
How many color and leadership in your company?
Yep.
How have a board, how many people of color and diverse voices are around the table making decisions? Because we're talking about systemic racism. So the way you change systemic racism is you change the system that had been developed by people with white privilege. So those systems have been developed. So in each company, you have to look at your own system, because that system feeds up into a bigger system. And then what policies do you have in place, both at your company, and then what policies are enacted locally, regionally, that will change the system of racism? So cautioning everyone against just the gesture mentality. Those matter. They're important. People need to know that we stand with them. We back away. We drop our mic and give a Black leader the mic to speak into a space. But we have to continually be taking action and step into those spaces. And I urge every company to really take a strong look. The foundation, through the Future Makers Coalition partnership we have, which is focused on workforce, has been working for a couple of years on making sure that we're addressing equity and systemic racism in education and the workforce, and looking at data that clearly shows in everything. You look at the COVID numbers, you look at education numbers, you look at poverty numbers, you look at anything, and you see the gaps. The systemic racism is shining bright because of those numbers. So I think companies have an obligation and a duty to take a look at the way that they're operating and who is speaking into their vision and where the companies are going to go in the future.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I do agree. It's definitely an obligation. And remind me how you put it. The lens. I liked how you used that analogy. What was it? One more time.
Yeah, like everything you do. Like this shouldn't be a brand new piece of work. Like you shouldn't say like, now we're going to
exactly. Right.
Equity over here. Like bring equity lens over
Exactly.
here, and then examine everything you do. What vendors are you using? You know, who is speaking at your meetings? Who's being promoted? Be intentional about it.
Yeah.
If you put your existing work rather than siloing it over here, much more systems change can happen because you changed your system, not just an add-on.
Absolutely. No, that's great points there. And you even brought up, the point, companies make some form of a, statement, but then the rebuttal is, well, show me your board of directors. To even exemplify that, one of Reddit's co-founders stepped down. I'm blanking on his name. I'm not sure if you saw this. Reddit's co-founder stepped down, and they very quickly replaced him with Y Combinator CEO Michael Siebel, which actually very excited me very much. I've never spoke with Michael, but I participated in Y Combinator startup school, and so had the chance to communicate back and forth over a few different projects for Fieldr with them. Love Y Combinator's team. Michael's a very great guy, so I was very excited to see it work out just like that. That the Reddit co-founder stepped down, and the well-deserved Michael Siebel stepped into the board of directors. But no, it's a great point. It's not just having not just, for first and foremost, it's not just starting now, right? The systemic change and obligation every company should have started from ground zero, from day one, when you're building your culture and you're building your core values behind your company, right? That from the get-go is the direction you should be heading in. And then bringing your analogy of it is then going forward while continuing to build a business, while moving forward through everything, always wearing that equitable and diverse and inclusive lens. So every decision you make, every turn and destination you reach is all right with that same equitable and diverse vision, not just kind of a start and stop. So I absolutely hear it, and I love how you put it. I participated in maybe first. Let me ask you this: have you ever heard of a nonprofit called Leadership?
No.
Leadership. Okay, Sarah, you'd love them. I'll have to. Not only should I can send you information on them. I already see you writing it down.
I am because I don't want to forget.
Yeah, no, I love it. Honestly, I ought to make a connection, because I seriously think Leadership can do a lot with the foundation. But they're a nonprofit. They're based in Champlain, Illinois. Founded 35 years ago, 40 years ago by now. And essentially they launched what is a 4 and a 6 day leadership development course for young professionals, for students. Well, again, that was 30 years ago. That quickly got adopted by college campuses, who then turned them into other, college chapters around the country. So there's and now it's international too. So they have their Leadership Institute. And so back in March of this year of 2020, I was super, super, super grateful to have been invited and to be a facilitator and mentor for the FGCU Leadership Chapter that took a group of 30 FGCU students up to Lake Placid, Florida, a couple hours away on a bus ride, to the Lake Placid Camper Conference Center. And through the whole week, we went through a lot of different leadership development. And one thing that really stood out to me was not just the, I'll call it, curriculum for leadership development, the assessments, everything that was, just the tangible assessments that the students were doing that we would do, but then also just the activities and just the atmosphere of the whole program was a big common theme that I picked up. Was it was not just diverse, but it was inclusive. It was both. It was diverse and inclusive. And it wasn't just since then. I'm very grateful to have grown up in what I consider to be a very diverse neighborhood in Danbury, Connecticut. So it's been my personal culture from day one since I was born. And so I've been wearing that diverse and equitable and inclusive lens since I was a child. So very grateful for that. But again, going into this leadership program, at the end, I'm like, wow, like this just opened my eyes even further to the true systemic change that really does need to continue to happen. To the honestly, at the end of the day, the privilege that a lot of us do have, and at the end of the day, not only is it just a company's obligation, it's each and every single one of our obligations as human beings, as just part of the same common one human race, to do what we can, to do our part, to stand together and to fight for the Black community and fight for equitable world. So going off of that, let's speak to our listeners on an individual level right now. You talked about, I guess, really where the systemic change comes from and where companies ought to approach it at. Now, looking at just an individual, who they're not just individuals at the end of the day, they get together, right, and they become groups. We become a movement, a community. So what, as individuals, but as a community, can we do to really make that positive impact, and where do we go to make that positive impact? In the beginning of this, we talked about whether it's at that local, city, county, or federal level. but would love your expert opinion now, kind of bring it to it more of a community, individual level.
I always tell people when this topic comes up, because it goes back to that do something mentality, right? We want to do something, but something usually triggers that in you. And if people are new to that thinking, people ask, what's my purpose? How do I do something? How do I get involved? You have to really dial into that thing that strikes that inferno inside of you. There used to be a cartoon when I was a little kid. It's a long time ago. It would be vintage now. Popeye, the Sailor Man.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. You probably saw it on some rerun of Nickelodeon or whatever. But back in the day, right, Popeye was a cartoon. And he would get really upset about something. And he would use this line, I can't stand what I can't stand, and I can't stand it anymore. And then he'd pop open the thing of spinach and take it in, and all of his muscles would pop out, and he would do something to save the day. So I tell people, get connected to that moment where you say, ooh, I can't stand this, I can't stand it, and I can't stand it anymore. It keeps you up at night. There's usually a moment that you're exposed to something, your eyes are open to an injustice, an inequity, just something that just keeps you up at night. That's the place to get activated first. Don't be activated around what your friend is doing or somebody in your company is doing or something that you've seen. First, get in touch with that passion, that thing that really bothers you, because I think that's where the most authentic action is then going to come from. And we run the risk of feeling guilty if we're not involved in certain things. So you can't say yes to everything. There's so many things to do right now. You can give financially if you have the resources. Any amount helps, but maybe you don't. You can volunteer. Volunteering is changing a little bit. You can work on policy. You can write op-eds. There's so many things to do. First, get in touch with that thing that makes you just know you can't wait any longer. And then match it with what your skills and talents are. It's not going to look the same. Everybody isn't going to protest. Everyone isn't going to open a fund at the Collaboratory to support something. Everyone isn't going to give to the emergency fund. I think too often now we see something that everybody else is doing, and so we do that. And if you just take a little time to really get in touch with what it is inside of you, it's going to make all the difference in the world. And you're going to know, here's what I'm going to do with that. There's so many places to reaching out to the United Way. Students at FGCU have so many opportunities to get connected. And so I think that's the first step in that kind of thing. There's a lot of stories out there, like the one thing you do makes a difference, and it does sound cliche. So the next step in that is like, take your individual action, do that, but don't forget real change happens when systems change, not just with race and racial injustice and equity. That's at the forefront right now. But there are so many broken systems that your individual action counts, but remember, in order to make it last, also get in touch, look beyond that. If the thing for you is that people are hungry every day, I can't stand that a kid is hungry. Go ahead, volunteer at the soup kitchen, volunteer at the food banks, but then open your eyes to what is the bigger system that has to change, and spend some of your efforts there too. Because the reason you want to help is you want to get rid of it. You want it to go away. You don't want to just keep coming back because you feel great about working at the food bank. You want the food bank to not exist in 10 years. I used to work at a soup kitchen, and that we transitioned into a cafe because of dignity and all of that holds. And all the time I'd be interviewed, and they'd say, what do you want to see in 10 years at this place? I'm like, oh, I want to see this place either a museum to what the travesty of the injustice of not everybody having food looks like, or this place being used as a business center. I don't want this place to be here in 10 years. So as you're activating your individual passion, remember you're doing that to eliminate it, not to participate. Eliminate, not just participate.
That was extraordinarily inspirational. That was, I think, so that was amazing. I'm like sitting over here almost like at a loss for words. And so with that, you know, I don't even want to take the thunder from that. That was such a beautiful and such an effective way. I think our listeners can take what you just advised them and what you just kind of put out. And I seriously think to all of our listeners, honestly, I'm gonna be replaying that myself multiple times. So I encourage you all, swipe the little replay button back another 5 minutes just from now, and just really just dig into what Sarah just shared, because everything she just shared has not just been battle tested and well proven, but it is just so commonly accepted. You're able, what she just shared, everyone is able to do it, right? You even mentioned there are different, there's not just one archetype or one way that one person is supposed to give back or to participate or to do their part. It is identifying what you might be best capable at or what you might have the most available resources of doing. But it's right, getting started in the first place, but then looking beyond just getting started, looking beyond just the participation and the real activation, you know, real mobilization of your change that you want to see. I think, you know, you mentioned the term before in our episode. Civic engagement is a absolute priority. I think everyone, you know, has an obligation for civic engagement. And I was introduced to by one of my FGC professors. I'm going to call it a pipeline of stages of service learning of civic engagement. Sarah, it looks like you already know what I'm talking about. Kind of that stage one is that participation, that getting involved, really, I guess, making yourself aware, right? But then that stage two is that really activation, really then seeking, okay, having a part in that actual change, not just participating, although absolutely volunteering is great, but then really actively seeking the system, how to change that. And then I think, you know, there's like a third part to it, is then really being a leader, being, you know, one of those initiators who do then make that change, whether it is starting a nonprofit, whatever it be, to, let's take Sarah's example, whatever it be, to take that soup kitchen and to just have it not be there in 10 years, to be the one to initiate that. So I think that's all beautiful and very, very effective and wealthy knowledge. So we all appreciate that, Sarah. So, you know, with that said, we're kind of nearing the end of our episode here. So we're just now to love to put you back in the spotlight. What's happening in the world of Sarah, and where can our listeners find you? If they want to learn more about the foundation, they want to get in contact with you and just learn about what's going on.
So Collaboratory, like I said, is not just a place, it's a space. When it is safe to reopen and throw our doors wide open and have hundreds of people back here again, I invite you, if you haven't been, when it's safe for you to come back, I hope you'll come by the clubhouse. I would love to meet you and see you. But if you go to floridacommunity.com or collaboratory.com, you can see different opportunities to engage. There's some trainings. There's lots of ways to stay connected with us. I mean, Connor, today I learned about leadership. I learned about that pipeline. That's what happens when people connect. There's so much to learn from each other, and a pandemic doesn't keep us from being able to do that. Kind of in my life right now, I'm trying to make that balance, like we all are, between our work and life and making life work. We're home a lot more. We're connected with those closest to us a lot more. I'm trying to get outside a lot, do a lot of meditation, all the things that we're all trying to do right now. And I'm also on a big campaign to urge everybody to get out there and vote and to complete the census. Many of the counties in our region are at 50% or under. And I'm telling you, all the money that we're seeing supporting efforts right now through the federal government are based on our old census numbers. So when the next disaster hits, it's going to really rely on what we do now. So that's kind of a personal campaign I'm on. When people ask me, what can I do? Get out there and vote your voting line and complete that census. So I'm just spending a lot of time in my pool, standing outside and finding ways to connect with people.
Good. I love it. I will make sure that we get all of those links in there as well. We'll get all the links in the description. So anybody's watching the YouTube video or on any of the streaming services, Google, Apple, or Spotify, we'll have all the links shared at the bottom of this description. So make sure you check that out for all those different, the website, the funds, and of course then we'll even throw the census link in there, because I'm on your page. Not a lot. We need to make sure that everyone, as much as we possibly can, every single person, if that's possible, to fill it out. Just to your point, that's what we rely on for funding, right? For preparation of whatever is to come in the future is the strength in numbers that we have here in the community. So we got to make our voices heard, everyone. So awesome. We'll get all that information out there. Well, Sarah, it was such an honor and honestly such a pleasure to have you on this episode. I hope you really enjoyed it.
I did. It's so great to connect, and it's great to connect with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. This was episode 12, Coming Together as a Community, featuring Sarah Owen, President and CEO of the Southwest Florida Community Foundation, but clearly much, much more than just that. And it was such an honor. And everyone, thank you again. Re-listen to this episode. Obviously, there is a ton of information, ton of gold in here. So make sure you re-listen and check us out at fieldr.app/Fieldr Academy. We're on all streaming services, YouTube as well. But other than that, we hope everyone stays safe, healthy, and stays opportunistic. And we will all see you on the other side. Bye, everyone.